Ross Garnaut made the point at the same conference that, and he singled out News Limited, but he said there's a lack of information, there's a lack of support essentially for reform, certainly of the kind that was there, he says, late last century.
True. But I mean, Ross has a particular problem with the media. The following day, Greg Smith, who was on the Henry Review and was a former advisor of Paul Keating, quite a senior Treasury officer as well, first point he made was, this isn't the media's fault, it is the fault of leaders. Now, there were public conversations that could be had in the past, and we've got to contrast this to the way the carbon tax debate has gone. Tax reforms of the mid-80s, option C, that thing was in the public sphere for about 6 or 8 months before the government finalised its position, and then it announced a second round reforms in September 85. John Howard's GST, they've been talking about the indirect tax system all through 97 into 98, and we finally got the GST package in August of 98. We've got this carbon tax discussion, which Julia Gillard starts at a more than what's a joint press conference +6 or something. It was an enormous mismessaging, I think, from the Prime Minister, and half the people at the press conference didn't actually have an idea of what it was she was going to announce.
How many will turn up at the end of this week when they finally make announcements?
I mean, she needs to announce it in her own right. I don't think she needs anybody else to do it.
Rob at that conference said that he'd vote for it tomorrow, even though there wasn't any at that
whatever
point.
It was.
And Tony Windsor said, do not read anything into my attendance at this press conference. So, you know...
As I say, look, one of the reasons Tony Abbott has picked this government, in his words, as phonies, is because they don't have the courage of their convictions. So they actually haven't argued the reason for a carbon price, because we had about 8 positions before the last election, and now we're in this position finally, as Annabelle points out, we've finally got the first bit of detail. This is so far into the debate, but the electorate hasn't actually been prepared on the reason for change yet.
But
we're going to talk about handouts now.
Before we bow down before Ross Garnaut, I mean, Professor Garnaut's own contribution...
We're back to the economist.
No, hang on. Professor Garnaut's own contributions to this debate, as I understand it, a paid consultant to the government, have been unnecessarily strident. Most people on government payrolls, as full-time or part-time, don't talk that way. He should have spoken as an academic and as an economist, but he bought into the political argument, and some of the backlash is due to him. Some of his contributions have been counterproductive.
Don't you think, though, these days people who get into public life in this way and do tasks like this for the government, they're open to a lot of personal abuse?
But Martin Parkinson gave an important speech at the same conference, the new Treasury head. He stated his views, but he was considered in his language. It was a very important speech. You got the very clear idea where he was coming from, but he didn't go slagging off people who disagreed with him, which Ross Garnaut does.
Well, I mean, at least, Garnaut's been consistent the whole way through, which is not what you can say of any of the actual politicians on the stage. I mean, this is the disconnect we've got here. The reason he's looking like a politician is because he's kind of assuming the advocacy role that we expect from our politicians, which we've not been getting. This is part of this weird...
He shouldn't have been put in this... whether it's his role or not, he shouldn't have been put in this position by leaders. I mean, this is...
he didn't have to accept the position.
No, it was
nobody says anything. I mean, we just basically wait for the next slogan from a Prime Minister and opposition leader. You can't have debates like that.
For 100 years in Australia, public servants have been given advice in a considered but dispassionate way. Ross Garnaut can fill into a tradition of a century. It's not that hard.